I'm standing by the Wheelwright Shop. Actually, when I found it, it originally was a house and built by Monroe Taylor back in the 1800s, located probably 8 miles southwest of Hart Square. They had converted the cabin actually to a shed for tractors. The front part of the logs had been cut out and there were tractors parked inside. Perfect for a wheelwright shop. So now you have a wheelwright shop next to the cotton gin, and inside you'll see tools that were used in making wagon wheels. You know, trying to find stuff for making wagon wheels, the anvils and the tire stretchers and this sort of thing, you can find and buy. But I was told about an original wheelwright shop over in Lenoir that had been used up till about 50 years ago. And so I went over to see if they would be willing to sell it or donate it to Hart Square. And the man said the people have broken in and have stolen everything, all the tools and stuff out of it, but you're welcome to have anything that's left in it. Well, I went over and we had to cut a small tree down in the gate to get in the front door here. Inside, I could have looked the rest of my life and not found what I found inside. 2 total pickup truckloads. Everything from the little short pieces of wood that they made the hubs from, the patterns they made it from, the hoops they made for the wagons, the covered wagons. And I mean, it just unbelievable stuff. They would, when it stopped, and it's just like a capsule in time. They closed that building up, and inside I found everything that you would have seen that they would have been using the day they closed that thing up and the day they quit making wagon wheels. Yeah. Now you can come in, and Scott Beam and Jimmy Freeze, both great blacksmiths and also work as wheelwrights, will show you how to make a wagon wheel. In fact, the first wagon wheel that was made here at Hart Square is on the back of this door. And they were going to take it with them. They were fixing it for a wagon. And I said, please, please, I'll buy it from you. And they let me keep it. So the first wheel is made at Hart Square. Notice it when you go in, it's on the back of this front door.
All right, Jimmy, we're going to repair this rotten wheel here.
Okay.
I've got some spokes rotten out. It's been sitting for a while, so we're going to get this took apart and talk about fixing it a little bit. But I'm Scott, and we're here at the Wheelwright Shop in at Hart Square.
And I'm Jimmy Freeze. And
we're the wheelwrights here. So first off, we had to get this tire took off and repair these fellas.
And part of the construction of a wooden wheel, it really evolved out through the years. And the wheel you're looking at here was pretty much the last before they quit using them. So there was a lot of innovation in the last 100 years of it or whatever. But the iron tire, which is around here, that's what really binds everything together and gives it strength. And it supports the wood. And the wood on the inside is what holds the wheel, is the actual structural makeup of the wheel. It can consist of spokes and joints. But the tire has to be held on with something, and it's held on by heat and constriction. Whenever you put it on there, when it cools, it shrinks, and that makes it. But I guess we need to start at the center of the wheel.
Together. Yeah, we're going to start with the hub. Actually, this is a hub blank. It's already been turned out. Got the mortises cut in it for the spokes, for the tenons. All it needs is the bands. You put iron bands on it. That holds this hub together, keep it from splitting out. So that was turned actually on a hand lathe, I imagine. There's a hand lathe in the shop here. That was turned, and a mortise machine cut the mortises in.
And the mortises is where the spokes, as you can see on this big wheel here, if this was the right size, the spoke would go in the mortise. And that was your wood joint there to hold that together. And I guess as you come out, once you get the spokes in, you got the hub, the spokes, then you have to put a round piece on it. We call these fellows.
Yep. This wheel actually consists of sawed fellas, which are sawed out of a flat board. You can see the grain runs with the board here. So these were two spokes per section fellas. So they fit like this. Later on, and some companies just chose to do, especially later on, to do a half rim. So that was 2 pieces per wheel. This one, depending on the number of spokes, you had 14 spokes. you had 7 fellas. If you had 12 spokes, you had 6 fellas. This consisted of 2 fellas, or half rims, we commonly call them.
Yeah, and this was steamed and bent into a circle, so it took a little more of equipment to actually produce this style. So your average shop out in the country, he wouldn't have this equipment, so he would elect for the sawn fellas.
All right.
So after you get out to and get your fellas on here, the joint between the hub and the spoke was a square mortise, but normally, and especially in America here, there was exceptions, but the joint between the fella and the spoke was a tendon that was cut with a tool similar to this right here, which would just cut the end of the spoke off and make the tendon.
Right, and you had to drill a hole in the fellas and put it all together from the outside in.
Which was that right there. And that in itself, there was a good bit of knowledge that was required to do this, because you involved an awful lot of woodwork, but it also involved metal work also, which was more the blacksmith's trade. But the wheelwright had to, some wheelwrights did the woodwork and took it to a blacksmith to have the tire put on and stuff. But most of the time in the country shop especially, they had to do it all. So they had to have the knowledge of both trades, a certain amount.
And that knowledge was gained a lot of times in an apprenticeship. Don't know if there was very many trade schools at that point, but it was just handed down a lot of times from father to son, or with a young man going to work for a wheelwright or a blacksmith. And like Jimmy said, out in the country, small burgs or country shops, they usually did it all at one place. The bigger factories and stuff, the wood was done in one area, shipped over to the blacksmith. They set the tires, set the bands on the hubs. So apprenticeships were very important at that time. So a young man might work for a master craftsman for years before he was considered a master himself. So once the wood is finished, you get all finished putting the wood together, we use what we call a traveler. And this is just a tool for measuring circles or measuring round. So what we'd do is mark it and measure the wood and get that measurement. Then we'd measure the tire, and you want it just a fudge smaller than the wood.
And you'd measure the outside of the wood and the inside of the tire, because that's the two surfaces it's going to meet. And like I said before, earlier on, once you got the tire sized right, and that required some blacksmithing by forge welding together, which was the only type of welding they had then. And if you got it just right and everything, then you would build a big fire, usually, and set the tire down in it. And then when the tire expanded, you could just pull it down on there, and when you cooled it, it would tighten up in on the wheel and pull everything together and hold it tight. Eventually, I guess, in use, the wood would start to compress or whatever, and the tire would get loose in usage. So it was a regular maintenance thing to bring the tire back to the shop to have the tires shrunk, as I said, and reinstalled. And later on, they actually came out with tools that they could clamp on here and shrink it cold and not have to heat it. Some people never liked that. Some people liked the convenience of it. So there was a lot of innovation and everything through the years. But most of the time, even today, they are put on hot a lot of times. So not very many people even now have those tools.
It's a pretty big machine, hydraulic machine to set cold tires. So we do it hot. We'll set it and heat it and put it on. That brings everything together, puts dish in the wheel. We didn't talk about dish, but dish is actually the strength of the wheel. We cut our tendons that go in the hub on an angle, and that's just like a dish. You'd look at a plate you eat out of as a dish. You can actually see it.
We hold this wheel up here, you can actually see that the rim is off to one side of the hub, and you can see the spokes coming this way. Well, this would always be the wagon side right here, and this would be the outside. And if you can imagine a wagon running on a hillside, then all the weight's trying to push this hub out of the center of the wheel. And with the band around it and it pulled to the side like this, it gives it great strength. It would actually be weaker if you done it this way, but all the weight's usually on the downhill side of the wagon, so it would be pushing down this way. So that would keep it from actually breaking the tendons off and breaking the spokes out of the wheel. You got to have something to keep it from flopping back and forth and everything like that. And everybody talks about alignment of your car nowadays. They actually did alignments on wagons years ago too.
Actually had toe in and
camber. Yeah, they called it gather then. And
yeah.
And yeah, let me put this wheel back up here again, and I'll show you what he's talking about there. When you're talking about the strength of a wagon, you can see if I hold that wheel over this way, this would be straight down here, but this would be up. But all of your force is on the bottom part here. The hub is on the axle, and the axle is trying to push down. So the strongest time this thing is when that wheel, when that spoke is what it's called plumb, running straight up and down. Because every time you get at an angle, it gets weaker. So they would set the axle to where that wheel would actually set like this. If you look at a well-tuned wagon, you'll look and you'll see the wheel set like that, but the bottom will be straight and the top will be flared out.
Yep. And then it actually, the front wheels had to gather on where they run inside just a little bit too, so you didn't have a lot of pressure running on the wheel axle nuts, which would wear its wheel out unnecessarily.
Yeah, they did everything they could possibly do to make the wagon run lighter and smoother for the horses, because, and even a hand cart or anything else, if you're pushing it all day long, the horse is pulling it, then you want it to run it as light as possible and there's less friction. And might also note that a lot of your earlier wagons had taller wheels, and that's because a tall wheel will roll over rough ground better. And as you got better roads and everything, it was not necessary. And by having taller wheels, you had to lift stuff higher to get it into the wagon. So unless you needed them, you didn't want them. But
so as time passed, the roads got better, the wheels got shorter, so the loading got easier.
Yep.
So
it's
kind of evolution, just like the wheels evolved.
Yeah.
We also have a wheel here, the first wheel that was built in this shop at Hart Square that was a complete rebuild. Jimmy and myself built it in 1999, and it's been hanging on the door here ever since.
Yeah, Dr. Hart wouldn't let us take it home with us.
No. All right, this is a real common repair for us in the shop that we do now, because it's set around, this wheel is probably set in the mud and drew moisture, and the termites got in and eat away the spokes and the fella. So what we would do here is take the tire completely off. This particular tire is in good shape, so we'll resize it and make it work. Sometimes we have to roll a new tire, and this is a machine right here that we'd roll. This is a tire bender. So we'd start a hole, just a straight piece of flat iron, and get use the swage block here to get our first bend, and then stick it in the tire bender and roll the tire. New tire, forge weld it, and size it, and set it. But this is a good tire. If it's too big, once we get the wood finished, we would take it out, and there's another tool here. Lots of tools in this shop. We use a lot of tools in this business. So, but it's a tire shrinker where you actually heat a section and mash it into itself and make it smaller.
That was a lot easier than cutting it and re-welding it, because of the type of welding you had to do, which was forge welding. And actually, I've done a lot of blacksmithing, and a tire is probably one of the hardest forge welds I ever done. So, because it's so big, you can't move it around. But that involves, that's the way stuff was welded for thousands of years. And it actually involves heating up the section of metal and lapping it over. And just when you hammer it, the molecules flow together. And that's the way it was welded.
But to repair the wood on this, we'd take this wheel apart and take a good section out and get us a board that thick or plane it to that thickness, and saw it with a saw, band saw, or a hand saw. Fella saw, there's a fella saw back on the wall back here. You'd actually saw it to fit, cut it to length and put it all together. Then we'd either shape our spokes from scratch or get a spoke blank and cut it to length, cut it to fit. This would be a spoke bolt. This is what we'd start with if you start from scratch. Of course, for this wheel, it'd be a little bit bigger bolt, but this would be a blank. This is a new blank that's ready to turn a tenon on. You just drive it into the hub, cut it to length, put a tenon on it with the tenon tool. So, then after, like I said, after all the wood's finished, then measure your tire. This is a good tire. This is a almost perfect tire actually, so it would be used again. Sometimes they get worn out from the abrasion of the sand, so they're cupped out underneath, so they're just not able to use. So we try to keep it as economical and as simple as we can.
And a lot of people say they want to fix their own wheel, and that's fine if you want to get into it, but just you got to realize that what we're telling you here is just a small part of what the knowledge that is required. You start putting it together, you're going to run into all kind of problems and everything, and it took me several years to get to where I could actually put a wheel together that I thought would stand up.
Yeah,
and
yeah, we did a lot of trial and error, and it's just kind of one of the things, a lot of specialty tools, and
yeah.
But we'll be glad to show you how to fix a wheel and show you how to do repairs at the festival, and just come by the Wheelwright Shop and see us.
Okay. Get this thing. Think that one will work?
I think we'll make it work.
Here I'm standing in front of a real early wagon wheel rim, where they did the rim anvil, probably dating 1700s. Great story about this one. I bought this in Charlotte probably 10 years ago from a dealer from Maine who comes to Charlotte at the big flea market when they have the big shows. And he said, Doc, I wish I'd have known you 25 years ago. I said, I sold the most beautiful one. It was a combination of a swage block, which has multiple curves, and you'll see it inside, to some big museum about 25 years ago. I said, I sure wish I'd have known about it, and you sold it to me. Well, I came in and put this down. I walked into the main shop. I bought that daggum thing from him 25 years ago. It was in my shop, and that's the one you'll see as you go in. I couldn't wait to go back the next couple months when he had another show to tell him that he did sell it to the right museum. So.